Welcome back to the Student Hub Live. In this session, we're going to focus on getting started with the Open University. So this session is aimed primarily at Level 1 students, but of course there'll be information in here that's relevant to all students. And what we're really hoping is that you can share some of your experience in the chat box. Now, I hear that people have been talking about some of the things that they wish they'd known when they were an Open University student. HJ and Priya.
Yes, well, Davin, we're on the food again. Coffee said if he knew how much coffee you would drink, he would have brought shares in the coffee company. And I think all the talk about cake and food we have, we better start, going to the stock exchange and getting some shares in those companies. Because
yeah, absolutely.
I definitely comfort eat while I'm studying. It's just have something on the desk, isn't it? But,
absolutely. It'd be great to know what your favourite study snack is. If you found something that's really kept you going, just let us know.
But if there is something you wish you know when you started, so like a certain resource or certain study tip, something you found out along the way, we'd love to hear it. And I'm sure everyone starting out in the chat would love to know as well and have that great advice from you.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Now, there are often so many really, really good tips which are worth picking up on and trying. OK, I'm joined by Paul Piwek, who is a senior lecturer in computing with the Open University. And you're going to talk us through some of the things that students may or may not know about already when they're starting Level 1. Now, we've got a lot of widgets, these interactive voting tools. So if you could fill those in, you'll see they're bright and colourful and very, very easy to do. All you do on them is select the option that applies to you. So are you new to the Open University? Which level are you studying? Just select the appropriate one there, which best describes your area of study, and if you've accessed the Open University website, and also have you found the Are You Ready quizzes. And we're going to start by looking at those pretty much the first thing, Paul. So we've got some slides we're going to show you. Now, these will be very small on your screen, but they'll just give you a rough indication of some of the resources that are available on the Open University website. So, Paul, the first thing is to start thinking about, am I ready for study?
Yes.
I mean, most people here will have signed up, so hopefully they will say yes.
So one of the things you mentioned is the Are You Ready for quizzes. So one thing those can help you do is to sort of give you a little bit of a diagnosis in terms of other particular areas of preparation that you might want to spend a bit of time on. For instance, over the summer, if you say start in October. To find those, I think that will come up on the screen in a minute.
Yeah.
So basically, if you know what course you're going to do, the easiest way to get to them is actually to just enter that on your search engine with Open University. You'll get to the module description or the study at the OU page.
Yeah.
That page then has basically a tab with which specifies what the entry requirements are, or the am I ready for that particular module.
Brilliant.
So we see that here on the screen. So there are these tabs there. It has a sort of a little summary of what you need to do.
So here we can see the entry requirements, but of course the Open University is mostly open access, except if you suddenly say, I'm doing credit transfer and I'm all of a sudden delving into Level 2 chemistry, in which case there might be some requirements. But it's important to look at the entry requirements. Why?
Because basically that then means that when you actually start your studies, you are really ready.
Yeah.
So what those sort of statements do is they give you a little overview. There's, if you are in doubt, there is an opportunity to talk to an advisor. But there's also this quiz, and that's really the key thing. So most modules will have a quiz or some other resource where you can actually then home in on, say, a particular area where you want to prepare yourself a bit more before you start at this Level 1 module.
Brilliant. Now, you've mentioned the Are You Ready quizzes. We've asked people at home whether they found them. 78% said that they have, which is brilliant news. And we'll show you what they look like for those of you who haven't. Some of you haven't yet accessed the Open University website, which you can start doing. And there's loads and loads of really useful information there. So let's just have a look at this Are You Ready for the quiz, and some of the quiz questions that you can see here. So, Paul, what happens when students fill these in, and what happens if they are not ready? And does a big alert go to the Open University who says, deregister the student?
No, not at all. You can do this completely anonymously if you want. You can also log in, so you can later on look at your results again. But that's really up to you.
Yeah.
It's really for you as a student to decide, am I ready?
Yeah.
So as you saw there on that screen, there are different types of questions that it asks for. They're very...
and they'll be specific to each module, won't they?
They're specific to each module, although there's a lot of commonality because some of the things are just about have you actually set apart enough time to study?
Yeah.
How are your language comprehension skills, maybe your English skills,
Yeah.
which again you would need on any level 1 module, because
Yeah.
there will be writing, reading, listening, etc. involved.
Yeah, and on some of the modules, we have various diagnostics. So we've got a slide to show students as well about getting ready for T112, which is the module that you're involved with.
That's
and this is
right,
where
yeah.
there are questions that are a little bit more specific. Perhaps there are some things that module might focus on, whereas other modules might not. So here we can see on the screen some of the specific things there.
Yeah.
Tell us what's important here.
So here we have 3 things. So there is the comprehension. So this is again language comprehension. That
Yeah.
I would say applies to any module. So it's sort of making sure that if you take a short piece of text, to
Yeah.
what extent you can read and understand the
Yeah.
content of that. And there's some little multiple choice questions on that. Then there is numeracy. So that goes more into sort of STEM related subjects, I guess. And there's problem solving.
Brilliant.
Problem solving is a bit more about given that this is the second module where the students have picked up
Yeah.
the sort of programming and problem-solving skills.
Yeah.
But again, what it does, it has this traffic light system, so it will give you green, red, or amber.
Yeah.
And basically, the idea is if it's all green, then you're ready.
Yeah.
If there's some amber, there's some links there as well
Yeah.
to say, okay, here are maybe some open resources you could use to brush up on that particular skill. If there is an item where it's red, that's not necessarily the end of the world.
Yeah.
The advice then really is to talk to an advisor who can really
Yeah.
advise you with regards to your specific situation and
Yeah.
what you might need to do to get ready. Because really, the aim in the end is to get ready. It's not to say you're not ready. It's about how can I get
How
ready.
can you prepare? Yeah, and especially for students who are watching this now, they've got a
Yeah.
good length of time before they start in September or October for their next module to actually do some of these things and be proactive. And we'll talk about some of those things that they can do. But I guess the take-home point right now is that these aren't assessed. They're not a requirement as such. They're there to help students and to direct them where they need to. And you've got the useful links as well where students might need to upskill on certain areas. And then I guess that takes the whole problem of trying to reflect and think about what you're good or bad at, especially if you're new to the Open University and you don't really know what it's all about. So these are really, really helpful. So some of the things that you'll direct students to, we've spoken a little bit earlier about OpenLearn and some of the content there. And we've got these lovely badged open courses, box. And there are lots of study skills and a whole range of really, really brilliant material on OpenLearn. And there's also Study at the OU as well, which has got some great advice on it. So let's take a look at some of these box then, these badged courses on OpenLearn, just briefly so you can see what they look like. So here's a slide that shows some of the courses. And the really great thing about these is it tells you how long it's going to be, at what level you've got, and gives you a whole range of options. You can search using the search function, you can sort by certain areas, etc. So they're really, really easy to use, aren't they?
Definitely, and with the box, actually, there's still a fairly limited number at the moment. There are 30 on there, so it's actually possible to browse all of them.
Yeah.
A lot of them are about generic or transferable skills, like beginning study in higher education, or again, language skills or numeracy skills, and they are really good for that. And typically, well, they all have the same format.
Yeah.
So they take 24 hours to complete, typically 8 sessions of 3 hours. You get some assessment throughout as well. So at the end, if you do that, you get a badge, and you can also then, for instance, show that on your social media, even on, say, LinkedIn or other profiles. So you have some external sort of.
So where does the
visibility
badge
of that
go?
as
Is
well.
it just something you can say you've got?
No, it will actually then show, say, on your social media profile, whatever social media platform you're using.
Yeah.
So you can really, you get a badge.
A badge,
there.
and you can make
so
something
somebody
of
who
it.
then, say, an employer or somebody who is just interested in how you're progressing can actually see that. It doesn't, of course, it doesn't count as a credit to your actual qualification, but it's still, it's evidence that you have been active with regards to your area of interest.
Your areas and getting ready for study.
Yeah.
No, that's perfect. And then OpenLearn's also got a whole range. That's another sort of way. I mean, the box will be within that also. So if you go to OpenLearn, you can find lots and lots of things. But also, perhaps if you're interested in a particular subject or you just want to start learning something, again, a similar sort of format where you've got the level and the hours and the time and a nice sort of outline of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You can choose something there.
So there's a lot more choice. So there are over 1,000 different sort of courses, often tasters of existing modules.
So you can see the search function here.
yeah.
You can just dive in and start. So you can search by a range of things. There are various tabs there. You can look at the latest courses. You can look by certain areas, etc. Or you can just browse and say, I really want to know about food and cake.
Yeah, and I would say that's in contrast with the BOK, which is there are some really good things for transferable skills. The wider open learn is if you're studying a particular topic, say STEM or arts or history, then you can really find some modules specifically on that topic and maybe already sort of get yourself prepared with regards to the knowledge or the content rather than the skills.
Yeah. And the thing I like as well about Open Learn is there are lots of articles on there, so it's not all big things. It's not like 8 hours necessarily a week of this, that and the other, but you can just go in and find some really topical, relevant things, like the Brexit Hub, for example, is a great source if you are trying to figure all that out. Okay, so what are some of the things that students might then look at in terms of techniques? You've got some really, really great ones, this Pomodoro Technique, which I'm sure people at the Student Hub have mentioned before, and do keep sharing some of your tips and things that work for you. But aside from looking things up, doing a BOK, etc., what might be some of the ways that you'd recommend getting prepared?
Yeah, so the Pomodoro technique is a really interesting one. So a colleague of mine is really really into that, and we've also sort of integrated into our module material. The idea is basically, so Pomodoro is, tomato in Italian, so it stands for a kitchen timer and in the shape of a fruit or a vegetable. The idea is that when you're trying to set apart time for study, there can often be lots of interruptions, especially nowadays also with social media. I find myself often, shall I just check this Twitter feed quickly or some Facebook? And that's not the optimal way to actually study for sort of a really concentrated period of time. So what the Pomodoro does, the technique does, is say, okay, you set yourself a particular goal to study a particular bit of text maybe or content. You plan what you particularly want to get out of that, and you set apart exactly 25 minutes for that, and then you set the timer and you start, and you really take that as an uninterrupted piece of study. So you really don't want to sort of in the middle go and do some browsing or something else. If you do that, you really have to start a new Pomodoro again. So the idea is really in that way to sort of reinforce yourself to be a bit more disciplined with regards to that. The other thing then, that the other component it has is, once you've done your 25 minutes, then typically the advice is to have a sort of piece of paper where you've written down what your goal was, and you then tick that off as a real physical action to sort of reinforce this idea that sort of gives you a little bit of a stimulation and to do the next one as well. Once you've done one, take a little bit of a break, a few minutes, and if you've done say 4, then take a longer break. But all to sort of to really get to these very concentrated bits of study and minimize sort of distractions.
Yeah.
And if you get into that habit, it can be really with the ticking and with the physical time, but it can really reinforce that pattern.
Because students who've registered, they can't see their module websites right now because they'll come to life just before the course starts, which is great. And when they do, they'll see then that things are often broken down into nice chunks. You can tick them off as you go on your study planner, and you have an idea, like you do with Open Learn, about how long things might take, etc. So you can carve up your time. But this whole idea about sort of finding time is important, because I think one of the things students really struggle with is, I've got 8 or 16 or 20 hours to find in a week, which can be really hard, because when I started my studying, I thought I'll do that on a Sunday. That'll be fine, between 8 and 24 or whatever hours. And I just used to think, and of course it never worked out that way. And equally sort of trying to pack it all in one day was clearly never going to work. But this 25-minute thing is quite interesting, because there are two things going on here. One is this sort of idea of really focusing a goal with a limited time. And the second is not having any interruptions during that time and really being able to focus. And that seems quite achievable, because you could probably do that between X and Y, or between the kids coming home and, when they've got a snack, you could put that 25 minutes in, etc. So that's a useful thing for students to do. How could they start doing it now then, if they don't have their course?
It's just coming back to what you showed earlier on, so the box and the Open Learn material.
Yeah.
So pick a bit there which really interests you, or some skill maybe which you want to develop, and maybe start doing that over the summer, but using the Pomodoro technique.
Brilliant. So they go do their diagnostic, think, I'm all right, in which case I can go and do what I want, or maybe I should look at a bit of this, this and this, and then they can start doing those things, and again really try and focus on how much time that's going to take, quantifying the task, and then going and doing it. What can go wrong? No, what can go wrong?
Well, there can of course be live events which mean that you can't set apart enough time and you have to sort of reschedule. So yeah, you have to be flexible and you have to keep thinking on your feet and keep going. But I think because the chunks, especially with the Pomodoro, are so small, it is possible to always sort of find that 25 minutes, and it also makes it sort of, but again, that's maybe my personal experience. It will be different for other people. Just setting apart 25 minutes is sort of feasible and overseeable, and just getting started on that is also it's more doable than saying, okay, now I'm going to study for 2 hours to finish this whole book or whatever. So yeah, it helps you to really get going in these short spurts.
I wanted to talk about growth mindset because sometimes, you know, we can sort of think, you know, especially if people are saying, well, I wish I'd known this when I started studying, and you can sometimes think I'm going to be really, really diligent. I'm going to get everything matching in terms of all my stationery. I'm going to get a desk set up in the hallway or something, and I'm going to really, really focus on everything. And I used to buy a really lovely book. And in fact, I didn't want to write in it until I could write properly. Like I wasn't prepared to scribble on it on my, and it really stopped me actually, because I put all these barriers in place that I was going to be a perfect student. And because I didn't have X, Y, and Z, I was really debilitated in the end because I couldn't just scribble notes on the back of a pen and paper. I had to draw diagrams. I had to sort of do things initially. And I wonder about how we can sort of get around this idea about working with stuff. You're never going to be perfect right at the start, and about how you sort of learn and grow, which is what I see in so many of my students. It's like, I try this, not so good. Actually, I found this works for me. And then they'll talk to other students and they go, well, I do this. And then they'll go, oh, that's a great idea. And it's all about building, isn't it? And really growing with both what you've got available to you and also who you are.
Definitely, yeah. So the growth mindset. So this is something which there's a research sort of program by a professor at Stanford University, Paul Piwek, who sort of explored this over a long period of time. This really works, and it's contrasted with a fixed mindset. So the idea, it's really about how you think, how you envisage yourself as a student. So I'm equipped with particular capabilities and aptitudes, and those are fixed. And if I do say a quiz or a test, and I don't quite score as well as I thought, as I'd hoped for, that just confirms my image of, you know, where I am. Versus this growth mindset, where you really think in terms of these aptitudes and capabilities, the things that you develop as you study and as you go on, and you view the quizzes and the tests and the assessment as opportunities to improve yourself, not as opportunities to show necessarily where you are now, but to learn for what you're going to do in the next TMA or the next ICMA or the next quiz, basically. And you're continually trying to sort of make yourself better. And the nice thing is, so there are real studies which show that if you have that mindset, this growth mindset rather than the fixed one, that does really help. So it really, then in the end, in the long run, you do better in terms of your studies.
Yeah. It's very popular in schools, and I think this idea that failures are good, that learning happens with bad things, and then you sort of revise and adjust is great. But for adults, especially, you know, maybe adults who've had bad experiences of education, we were just talking about this beforehand, you know, and coming to the Open University, they really build their confidence and get their skills up and running and things. But equally, sometimes as adults, I don't think we're so up for failure, are we, as children are?
Definitely, and I say there is, of course, where there is the formal assessment, there is always this, there is a summative or a sort of aspect to that. What I would say is make especially also a lot of use of we've got lots of activities in the module materials, and there are also quizzes that are formative, so they are not actually contributing to the final mark, and really make optimal use of those. Discuss that with other students in the forums. We've on the module I'm chairing at the moment, we've got really constructive sort of discussions where in computing and IT, of course, we've got huge differences in terms of beginning conditions. So some students are already programmers for years, others have just started. And when you've just started, you might feel a bit unsure, but they're really, the discussions are really good, and students are helping each other on the way and building up confidence, because everybody goes through that period when you start to do something new where you're feeling insecure, and You need to have that sort of little push to keep going and not just say, okay, I give up, this is not for me, kind of thing.
Yeah. Because I think it's one of those things that a lot of students don't appreciate, that from level 1 it starts really easy and nice and gradually, and the assessment builds and builds, and everything's really well thought through and designed, so you don't have had to have done anything. But I think that you do limit yourself if you haven't prepared. So it's almost this thing that we want to encourage students to sort of see where they're at and do as much as they can do to sort of prepare, but equally know that once they start, there's an awful lot of time, and it's not like it's day 1 and it all kicks off from there.
Absolutely,
Yeah, okay. Let's take a quick trip to HJ and Priya and see how everyone is at home.
I think we're all getting ready for our study, aren't we? There's some great
Lots of
tips being
preparation.
shared about things that we wish we'd known, and some resources we found along the way.
Yeah.
I think top tip of the day, though, that Davin has is that we should move our study area closer to the kitchen, just so the snacks are easier to
Closer
get
to the snacks, absolutely.
I like that. But we're talking about all the resources available. So iTunes has a university section. The Open University is on there as well. So if you want to get into it, might have a look what's on there. And we had a great tip that before studying, why don't we set out some time when we think is best for us to study,
Yeah.
and maybe read a book and then see, actually, is that the best time for us? So I really like that tip.
Yeah, I've also sort of mentioned on here to the guys joining us today about, scheduling that extra time for if you use social media. If you're going to use your social media, schedule that time in, get the balance between study, because study should be enjoyable. So think about spending time with your friends and family, and it's just balancing everything. And we've got some great useful tips on the help centre. So you could work out your timetable and help you manage your time.
A comment that's just come up is that someone said that the discussion about failure is of great comfort, because it seems to be prominent in my studies, but now as we're progressing and moving forward, confidence is building, and it seems there's more successes along the way, which is fantastic to hear.
Brilliant to hear, absolutely.
Brilliant, excellent. Thank you for all those tips and things, and I think it's very important to realise that it's pretty hard to fail if you do a lot of stuff and you talk to your tutor as well. And those sort of times when things build up is really important to recognise that you're doing better, and it's actually really, really boring if you go and getting really, really good marks, because you're probably not being that challenged. I wonder if sort of with that view we could look at postgraduate studies, because some students come to the Open University having never done undergraduate studies with us, and they'll come, and in fact this afternoon we're talking about an MA in Crime and Harm and an MA in Philosophy, and some of the programmes that are available through Arts and Social Sciences, for example, as there are with many other of the faculties. What's different for postgraduate students coming to the OU, and what do you think they should need to know if they're starting out?
So I think the key thing is, so with undergraduate studies, one of the aims is to become an independent learner as you move through the levels. And at the end, ideally, you're able to sort of set your own study pace and to do your own studies and to pick a topic and sort of brush up on that. With the postgraduate studies, so masters and also PhD that I know a bit about, it's actually, it's more about not so much becoming a learner, but becoming a researcher. And so the big difference there, I guess, is especially also when you come towards sort of what's sort of the end aim, so do your own project, maybe a little research project, is that during your undergraduate studies, you might do a particular assessment or a particular bit of work, and there is typically, your tutor will mark that, they will have some kind of model answer which says this is roughly what we expect. When you get into research, that's not quite the case anymore. You're really starting to formulate your own questions and think rigorously about how can I answer those in a systematic way, so people who are in the know in that field accept, are persuaded by the arguments that you provide. So it's a different level of sort of independence almost, where you really need to get away from this mindset that there is somebody who knows the right answer, because there isn't. You're really building the answer, and that can be quite challenging, but it's also extremely exciting, because that's really what research is about. So,
yeah, no, excellent. I wanted to ask about your own research, actually, because you do something very interesting, which is on question generation. What is that?
So this is an area of, a sub-area of what's now artificial intelligence, basically, within that language processing. So what we're working on is within computing algorithms which take data or text stored on computers and turn that into text again. You might come across that sort of translation algorithms are sort of the classical example. But more recently, there has also been a lot of interest in take a bit of text, and it could be OU course material, or it could be a leaflet, and generate a question about that text, with the idea, for instance, that you could then use those questions to rehearse that content. So this is something we actually didn't really discuss earlier on, but one really good way of practicing or making information stick in a bit of learning content is really to, once you've read the text, to ask yourself some questions or use the activities in the module materials and go through those, so you really become aware of the things that you haven't picked up yet and the things that you have. So what we are trying to do is build technology which as well can, ideally, what would be sort of the vision for the future is that you have a bit of course material, you select it and you press a button and it will generate a couple of questions on the fly, which you can then sort of use to practice whether you really understood that. That's still a lot of that is still very much in the research lab,
Wow.
so I wouldn't say that that's in the next
No,
year.
but it would make writing those questions so much easier when we do them. That's one thing I think actually that people new to the OU might not quite understand. And if we may end then on that sort of idea, that often you will read a piece of text and then you'll get these questions. We've talked about them being maybe reflective questions, or they might ask you certain things. And sometimes they're things that you might think, oh, I'm not going to bother thinking about that, etc. But when you're on your own, irrespective of whether you're doing undergraduate or postgraduate research, those questions are the things that would be the equivalent of talking to other people in a classroom. So how important is it that people engage with those sorts of activities?
Well, yeah, extremely important. So again, there is actually a lot of research in psychology and education going back for over a century, where people have looked at this and where really it has been shown that so just reading a bit of text again doesn't really make it stick as well as actually either answering somebody else's question or you yourself sort of thinking about what did this piece of text or video or activity want to convey to me, and sort of rehearsing that to yourself, and that can really make the difference between whether something really sticks or not. And it also sometimes you might have a bit of content, say, which you feel, oh, I really understand this all reads wonderfully. It's actually when you start to ask questions about it, you realize, well, actually, I didn't really understand what they meant.
And we'll show you a slide just of an example of one of those self-assessment activities, just so you can see, but there'll be something very familiar. So here you can see it's a checking a logic circuit, and this is an optional activity. Some you'll see are optional, some are things, but it's just, again, a key thing that you should really sit and think about, and maybe write a note in your notebook as well, and that will really enhance your learning. It's not something you send to the tutor, but it's one of those self-directed areas of study that's very important.
Yeah. And this happens to be an example of a self-assessment one. So the idea is with those that either the answer is hidden or it's in the back of the book. So you really, the idea is really to think about it yourself before you sort of jump to the answer. And then there are also exploratory ones, which are more about you're starting with a new concept, and the idea is that you think about it for yourself a little bit first. And in those cases, there isn't always necessarily correct answer. So there will then be a sort of a discussion which you can then compare with your own thoughts, and that's really just getting that thought process going is really the thing.
And once you've thought about it, like you say, it's more likely to stick in, you're more likely to understand it, and it's a really important part of learning. Brilliant. Paul, that's been an excellent session. Thank you so much for all your advice. We've got some of Paul's resources on the resource page of the Student Hub Live website. So we've got links to some of the books there, Taking Your First Steps into Higher Education, Succeeding with Maths, Digital Literacy, and an Introduction to Cybersecurity as just some of the options. But again, as we say, you can go onto OpenLearn and search for yourself using those variety of search formats that we've shown you. Okay, we're now going to take a quick video break and look at the Beryl building on one of our campus tours, and then we're going to come back looking at moving on up, so moving between levels with Rachel Penny. We'll see you in a few minutes.